Hey guys, what's going on? In this episode of the Academy of Critic, we're going to be going over the 82nd Academy Awards, which honors films released in 2009. And unlike most of my videos, this one's actually going to start with the documentary feature category. The nominees being Which Way Home, The Most Dangerous Man in America, Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers, Food Inc., Burma VJ, and The Cove. The only one here that I've seen is Food Inc. And bear with me for a bit because it's been a long time since I've seen this one. I actually watched it in my freshman health class in high school. And if I'm being honest, it does a really good job exposing the just the widespread dangers of factory farming and the health implications that it can have. I this movie did briefly make me very deliberate about what I was eating. So although I don't remember too much about the documentary itself, it definitely had an impact on me. The next category we're going to look at is Best Animated Short Film. The nominees are A Matter of Loaf and Death, The Lady and the Reaper, La Dama y la Muerte, Granny O'Grim's Sleeping Beauty, French Roast, and Logorama. Now, I've only seen one, so not sure where I am able to stand in terms of giving out snubs, but Partly Cloudy is a very nice movie. It would have been nice to see that here. But yeah, the only one I have actually seen is A Matter of Loaf and Death. And I think it's really funny that so far the only animated short films I've covered are just Wallace and Gromit movies. It's just something I grew up watching, and I mean, this one was a personal favorite of mine, although they're all really, really good. It always sucks if you ever, you love something as a kid and then you revisit it as an adult, only to find out that even though you used to love it, it's really not that great. I'm happy to say that this is not the case for this one. It was a very delightful rewatch, and it had been a really long time since I saw it. So, yeah, aged really well. There's simply no bad Wallace and Gromit movie. They're very consistent and they're very good. Moving on to original song, the nominees are Take It All in 9, Loin de Paname in Paris 36, Down in New Orleans in The Princess and the Frog, Almost There in The Princess and the Frog, and The Weary Kind from Crazy Heart. The only movie I've seen here is The Princess and the Frog, but there are two nominees from that movie, so let's get into it. Starting off with Down in New Orleans, which does have a very upbeat, catchy, rhythm to it. It's not a song that I'd probably listen to on my own, but it's undoubtedly very good. However, I do actually prefer the second Princess and the Frog nominee, Almost There, which I think the fun melody pairs really well with the jazzy instrumentals. It is my personal favorite here. But all that being said, I am happy that The Weary Kind is what ultimately won. All right, now the nominees for Best Original Score are Sherlock Holmes, The Hurt Locker, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Avatar, and Up. Okay, so these are a really good list of movies with very diverse scores to them. So I'm really excited to talk about them. Before I do that, I don't want to call them snubs because I don't think these movies should have been nominated over these ones. But I just wanted to mention that introducing Flint from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is a really great song, as is Dumbledore's Farewell from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Without further ado, let's jump right into The Hurt Locker. The best thing that the Hurt Locker score has going for it is its just ability to build unease. This movie requires a whole lot of tension, and the score plays a really irreplaceable role in building that. Although it's not a super tense song, I think the best song from the score is The Way I Am. So definitely give that a listen. But yeah, it definitely does its job. All right, the next nominee is Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now, Alexander Desplat makes a truly memorable score that really captures just the meek, innocent beauty while also maintaining a very unique sound to it. Just the songs I'm picking to represent the score at large are Christopherson's theme, as well as Mr. Fox in the Fields. Just the light plucking of the strings makes for a super like I don't know. It just feels like innocence and childhood. It just has a really delightful sound to it. It's a really good listen. All right, Avatar by James Horner. Yeah, so this score consists of a lot of drum-based tribal music as well as more awe-inspiring vocal songs, such as "Becoming One of the People," "Becoming One with Materi." I mean, it's a pretty long song, but definitely a good listen. I think it's probably the best score or the best song from this score. But yeah, I mean, it just addresses the beauty of Pandora and the wonder that comes along with just exploring this, new world. So yeah, very memorable score, very deserving. The winner of this award was Up, and oh my goodness, I am so happy that Up won. It is very deserving. It was really cool to see two animated movies in this category, actually. But as good as Fantastic Mr. Fox score is, it's really hard to beat the Up score by Michael Giacchino. Married Life in particular, it's the best song from the score. It's just amazing. On top of just having a really catchy melody, it can be super upbeat and sweet with the jazzy stringed instruments, but it also with a slow piano solo can be super melancholic and very very sad, which it does a really great job taking the helm of the storytelling. The married life montage is just one of the best ways to show a very long stretch of someone's life in a very short period of time with no dialogue and just relying on the music and visuals to tell the story. It's a spectacular job. I also want to point out Up with the Titles. Very whimsical, very catchy. I could listen to it all day. I also want to mention real quick Canine Conundrum. It's not as good as the songs I just mentioned, like Up with the Titles or Married Life, but I think it's a song that gets slept on. Canine Conundrum it's a pretty good song. But yeah, long story short, this is I think the best score of the year. I love this score. I'm super glad that it won. It's very deserving. All right, now moving on to sound mixing. The nominees are Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, Star Trek, Inglourious Bastards, Avatar, and The Hurt Locker. Okay, I haven't actually seen Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, but I mean, I know that the Transformers movies have crazy sound. I'm not surprised to see it here, but let's actually get into it, starting with Star Trek, which is also not a huge surprise. This is the exact type of movie you expect to see here. Obviously, there's the weapons, there's the technology, there's the spaceships and missiles and lasers and all that stuff that has a really great sound mixed into it. But on top of that, you have the living creatures on different planets. There's just a lot going on here, and I think, yeah, it's pretty expected that it would be here, but it's also very deserving. All right, Inglourious Bastards. For a movie that's very dialogue heavy, the sound mixing does pull through whenever it is called upon. Although most of the scenes are build up to a big explosion of action, the action pays off and sounds really nice. Although I'm usually not really focused on the sound while this is happening, which I guess means it's doing its job, it's just kind of blending in. But yeah, the climax of the movie is certainly the most hectic. And the sound is mixed pretty well. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Avatar. So, kind of like what I said about Star Trek, about having there be technology and spaceships and weapons and creatures. What I want to mention about Avatar specifically is the environment. Because they're living in a living environment of forest that they created and had to create the sounds of different creatures living in. Yeah, it just goes on top of itself and remains alive. It keeps that illusion of constant surrounding of life throughout the entire movie, which is a very long movie. But yeah, it's really subtle, but it's really impressive at the same time. Now, The Hurt Locker is the winner, and it's a good thing, honestly, because it's doing some really impressive stuff with its sound design. Unlike the gunshots and explosions of most war movies that are trying to get you to feel the intensity of the sound, and by being as rapid as possible, this movie actually slows things down and shows the impact of the sound and what it's having on the environment around it, with the rust of a car or the dust from the ground. It's a very unique effect that it just pays off spectacularly. All right, now moving on to sound editing, with the nominees being Up, Star Trek, Inglourious Bastards, Avatar, and The Hurt Locker. So this is the thing, like having a sound mixing category and then a sound editing category. I've said it before, I just don't think they're different enough to justify having two separate categories. And I think that really shows when the nominees are almost completely identical. The only difference in nominees here is that they swapped out Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen for Up, and it's like, okay, but this is going to be a little bit repetitive, so I'm not going to spend probably too much time on it, but let's talk about Up. So this movie travels through a whole bunch of different settings, from the cities to the jungle, to the falls, to the Zeppelin. All the while, you have these storms. You have literal dogfights. You have balloons popping. It's not a movie I usually think of for its sound design, but now that I am thinking about it, it does do a very good job with it. And I think I'm always down to see more animated movies in technical categories like this. All right, Star Trek. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, just because most of what I have to say about it, I've already said in the last category. Because, like I said, it's an almost identical category with an almost identical set of nominees. Speaking of, let's talk about Inglourious Bastards. I'll just say that even the talking scenes, though they're mostly void of loud gunshots or explosions or chaos, they carry an eerie silence when necessary, or even an eventful background soundtrack that allows the score to kind of build up the intensity as necessary. Avatar, yeah, the dragon sounds good. The action sounds good. The one thing I'm going to point out that I was kind of like, oh, I've heard that one before is there's a monster or the creature in the forest near the beginning of the movie that attacks Jake almost immediately when he gets on the ground. And its roar is almost identical. It might actually be identical to the Tyrannosaurus roar from Jurassic Park. So but at the end of the day, good sound is good sound, I guess. So if you have a good example, I guess you can use it. All right, the winner of this award is The Hurt Locker. And like I said, the sound editing is super unique and super interesting, giving kind of a whole other side of the world to the sound, or a whole other side to the sound of the warfare that's being put on screen. All right, the nominees for Best Visual Effects are Star Trek, District 9, and Avatar. All right, starting off with Star Trek. Whenever you're able to see what's on the screen through the relentless lens flares, the visual effects do not disappoint. There is a great sense of scale that doesn't let up whether the characters are in space or on Earth or elsewhere. There were a couple instances where I could tell there was some green screen going on, but overall, it's a very minor detail in a movie that overall has very good VFX. All right, moving on to District 9. And in all honesty, just like Star Trek and Avatar, District 9 has, spaceships and aliens, alien weapons. However, the big distinction is the aliens themselves, which are very insect-like. Their moving mouth parts have some real detail to them that really brings them to life. The eyes also have great thought put into them, quite literally, enabling the audience to really see the emotion that comes from these bug like creatures. And lastly, I just want to mention the unique mockumentary style that this movie is filmed in, which we'll talk about again, but it places these aliens into the real world that could feel cheap and fake if handled poorly, but instead feels very authentic and lived in. All right, now, the winner of this award is obviously Avatar. So this movie was always going to win. The CGI visuals are actually the main appeal of this movie, I'd say. It's simply impressive that they were able to craft a movie like this. The characters, settings, props, pretty much everything on screen for many scenes in the movie are all CGI to the point where it's pushing being an animated movie. That is an exaggeration, and there are many scenes that are live action, but it is really easy for the characters to disappear into the world of Pandora. The motion capture technology had only gotten better since we last talked about it in The Lord of the Rings, and that really shows. Even though their faces are CGI, the emotion and performances do manage to penetrate through. On top of the Na'vi and avatars themselves, the spaceships and planets look spectacular. Pandora being a moon, not a planet, we are always able to see the planet Polyphemus in the sky for much of the movie. I could go on and on about the effects of Avatar, but y'all are probably already familiar with how crazy these visuals really are. And now the nominees for Best Cinematography are The White Ribbon, Inglourious Bastards, The Hurt Locker, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and Avatar. The only snub I want to mention here is Polytechnique, which looks very, very beautiful. Without further ado, let's talk about Inglourious Bastards. This movie very much captures Tarantino's visual style. He has very stark color use that pops off the screen. Red in particular is dripping from the screen, which is fitting not only because of how bloody this movie is, but also because of the Nazi flag and its prevalence in the film, obviously. The overhead God's eye view shots of that he loves are present and effective as always, but one of the things that I think looks best in this movie is the backlighting. Whether it's blood, smoke, fire, or something else, this movie manages to backlight everything in a way that brings out a lot of detail. All right, now let's talk about The Hurt Locker. This film is shot in what I like to call controlled chaos. I'm not usually fond of shaky cam, but it really serves the movie here because it is well directed. It doesn't feel sloppy, random, yet it does feel hectic and chaotic. We know it's controlled though because I'm always able to tell what's going on, where the characters are in relation to each other. It's got to be really hard to do that, but Barry Ackroyd and Catherine Bigelow really do make it look quite easy. On top of that, there are some pretty establishing shots as well as the close-ups of bullets hitting the ground or explosions shaking the dust, stuff we've already talked about in the sound categories. All right, now let's talk about Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which I'm actually bittersweet on the Half-Blood Prince cinematography. What I will say right off the bat is that the focus and framing is very, very good. There are some shots in this movie that just look spectacular. The one thing that holds it back is the lighting and coloring. This movie has a rather dark and drab color palette. Don't get me wrong, this is a deliberate choice. It's supposed to match the dark place that the wizarding world is in now that everyone knows that Voldemort has returned. But I think it mentions in the book that this is the case because there's an uptick in Dementor activity. However, they never make an appearance in this movie, and if that is what the filmmakers were going for, it's not really made clear. I do think the movie looks good, but you almost can't see it. If you want to watch this movie in the daytime, you are straight out of luck. There are several movies that are like that. You can only watch them at night if you have any hope of seeing what's on screen. The Batman and The Godfather being the examples that immediately jump to mind, but at the same time, those movies are also really well shot, so it doesn't kill it for me. Once again, the winner of this award is Avatar, and although this movie isn't shot as uniquely or artistically as some of the ones we were just talking about, it is shot in a way that emphasizes, flaunts, and complements the VFX. When a movie wins both VFX and cinematography awards, you know that the visuals are just super striking, and this movie is. It can't be easy shooting a movie that is going to be mostly digital because it's hard to visualize how the final product will turn out. However, the final product looks pretty great, as I already said, even if it's not as artistically done as some others. Okay, moving from there to art direction, the nominees are The Young Victoria, Sherlock Holmes, Nine, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and Avatar. Avatar is the only movie I have seen, so let's jump right into an analysis. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I do not understand this win. I mean, some of the spaceship interiors are cool, I guess, but most of this movie is set in the jungle, and it's not like King Kong, the King Kong remake, where they built jungle sets. For a lot of it, they're filming in this gym-like setting that has like markers so that people know where things like trees would be in the movie. But yeah, I know there's probably more to the sets than I'm giving credit, but quite frankly, this is just a very bizarre win in my opinion. Okay, the costume design nominees are Nine, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, Coco Before Chanel, Bright Star, and The Young Victoria. You know what? I haven't actually seen any of these, believe it or not. So I guess I'm just gonna move on to makeup. The nominees are The Young Victoria, Il Divo, and Star Trek. Let's talk first about Star Trek. So in Star Trek, the main villain is the person I immediately think of when I think of makeup in this movie, but there are way more examples from this movie. Obviously, there are the Vulcans like Spock who have the unique ears, but there are also other alien species in this movie, all of which do look pretty good. The film editing nominees are Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, Inglorious Bastards, District 9, Avatar, and The Hurt Locker. Let's talk first about Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Yeah, this movie wasn't a film whose editing stood out to me immediately while I was watching it, but it undeniably does have a sense of style. Most notably, whenever Precious starts undergoing, abuse or trauma, she kind of retreats into her own mind to escape her anxiety. And when she does, she generally imagines herself as like a superstar on like a stage with everyone loving her rather than experiencing the hatred that she has to go through in reality. And when this happens, it always amps up the editing very rapidly, deliberately kind of juxtaposing with the much slower pace of the rest of the film, showing a very deliberate sense of style. Okay, the editing in Inglorious Bastards is very tight, very good. So it's very well cut together. Not only do they do a great job splicing together the cutaways for quick and effective exposition without making it feel clunky or crammed in there. That's something Tarantino is actually really good at doing in most of his movies. But also the dialogue scenes that build the tension, which I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but it's very very true. It just has they have an absolutely flawless flow to them. It's very well put together.
All right, like I've said before, District 9 is shot like a mockumentary, and that actually has a very unique job for the editor. Because most movies, they're in a setting where they have to pretend that the camera isn't actually there. We have to pretend we're watching like real people that aren't being filmed, even though they are. Whereas this is, because it's partially a mockumentary, for much of the beginning of the movie, especially, the editors have to splice together these shots in a way that a camera could actually be there. You can't have an impossible shot because in the film's universe there are supposed to be cameras there. So you could say that that's a challenge that restricts creativity, but I honestly think it just is giving an extra challenge to the editors, and they're doing a really good job pulling it off. Honestly, on top of that, they do a wonderful job during the introduction phase of the storytelling, layering the fake interviews over realistic B footage of the things that they are talking about, things that are being discussed. So yeah, pretty well done actually. All right, Avatar. I don't know fully how to talk about the editing in Avatar. I think it's in an interesting place where it doesn't quite feel as long as it is, but it also doesn't justify its runtime, which is a rare combination, but ultimately it's entertaining while also overstaying its welcome a bit. I do think there's some stuff that could be trimmed down here. The winner of this award is The Hurt Locker, and I'm very, very happy about it. It's very deserving. It just is able to subtly amp up the pace of the editing whenever danger is close, adding to just the tension and intensity of the movie. Watch the opening scene. The opening scene is a spectacular display of how to edit a scene to build such intensity. I'm really happy that it won. All right, on to the acting awards. We're starting off with Best Actress in a Supporting Role. The nominees being Anna Kendrick in Up in the Air, Maggie Gyllenhaal in Crazy Heart, Vera Farmiga in Up in the Air, Penelope Cruz in Nine, and Monique in Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, is the only one of these I've seen actually, so let's talk about Monique. Monique is so good in this movie. The first scene that really made me say like, "Wow, she's super great," is the scene where Precious is at the top of the stairs and Monique is at the her mom. Monique is at the bottom, and she's just hurling abuse onto her daughter, and it's a really hard scene to watch just because you're just saying she's just saying things that no parent should ever say to their child, and she does a great, she really commits to it, and I was like, dang, she's heartless and brutal. But the scene that humanizes her while also not justifying her as a villain is the end scene when she's talking to the welfare woman in the office, and she is being asked about past abuse, and she goes into it and starts crying. I mean, just all around, I was so impressed. So even though she's the only nominee that I've seen, I'm very happy that she won. Now, the nominees for Best Actor in a Supporting Role are Stanley Tucci in The Lovely Bones, Christopher Plummer in The Last Station, Woody Harrelson in The Messenger, Matt Damon in Invictus, and Christoph Waltz in Inglorious Bastards. Let's start off talking about Woody Harrelson in The Messenger. Woody Harrelson is an undeniably talented actor, and he does a really good job playing the stoic, by the book, you know, officer that doesn't want any emotion to show. Although he is probably the best performance in this movie, the idea of him winning this award is pretty crazy, especially when you consider the competition, the actual winner of this award, Christoph Waltz from Inglorious Bastards. So, yeah, let's talk about him. Holy cow, man. Christoph Waltz. He is so memorable in this movie. He isn't playing a character, he's creating a character. I know that Hans Landa was actually created by Quentin Tarantino, but I simply can't imagine anyone other than Christoph Waltz playing him. He's so talented, he's so good. He eats up the dialogue in the scene. He is the most memorable part of this movie, arguably. There's a lot going for it, but he's really, really good. He's got this polite nature that hides like a really truly like deep evil that's rooted in him. It could have felt inauthentic and sloppy, but it actually just feels rather chilling and horrifying at the end of the day. The way he can effortlessly jump between German and Italian and French and English, that's just something Christoph Waltz can do, by the way. He's perfect for the role. The casting, it's so good. He sincerely just knows these languages. He's so talented, and this movie displays that and leaves nothing to the imagination. He is. extraordinarily deserving of this award. The nominees for Best Actress in a Leading Role are Meryl Streep in Julie and Julia, Gaborni Sidibe in Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, Carey Mulligan in An Education, Helen Mirren in The Last Station, and Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side. Meryl Streep is so much fun to watch in Julie and Julia. She's pretty much doing a Julia Childs impression the entire time, but it's a darn good one, and she's just the perfect woman to play the role. I mean, she looks so much like her. Even if the other nominees are providing a more emotionally deep, performances, it is undeniable how memorable Meryl Streep is in this movie. But let's talk about the other nominees, starting with Gaborni Sidibe from Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. It's crazy that I haven't seen Gaborni Sidibe in anything apart from this movie because she's so good in this movie. There's a real sense of frustration, desire, want, anger. She's got a lot going on. You feel that broiling underneath the surface for a lot of the movie. It just kind of comes off her the whole time. There's moments of very sincere joy throughout this movie, but they're ultimately overshadowed by the struggle, hardship that she has to endure. I was very surprised also when I learned that this is her very first movie. Yeah, so she's really good in it. All right, the winner of this award was Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side. Now, Sandra Bullock is fun to watch here. She has some really good range, and she really fits well into the role of the sassy Southern mom who wants to care for her children while also not really taking any BS. She demands respect in pretty much every scene in the movie, and I think a really fun fact about her winning this year is that very shortly before winning this Oscar, she actually won the Razzie for Worst Actress for a movie called All About Steve. She even showed up to accept the award and give an acceptance speech, which is really, really funny. You're not going to really hear me talk about the Razzies much because um, I'm not here. I'm not making this channel because I hate movies. I'm making this channel because I love movies. So the Razzies just have kind of the opposite purpose of the Oscars, and quite frankly, I just don't really care about them that much. But I figured I'd bring this one up just because it's the only time someone has won a Razzie and an Oscar in the same at the same time in the same season for the same year. So yeah, it is really funny. So I had to bring that up. But yeah, she's really good in The Blind Side. The nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role are Jeremy Renner in The Hurt Locker, Morgan Freeman in Invictus, Colin Firth in A Single Man, George Clooney in Up in the Air, and Jeff Bridges in Crazy Heart. All right, let's talk about Jeremy Renner in The Hurt Locker. The Hurt Locker is the only of these films that I've seen. So I know Jeremy Renner mostly as Hawkeye. Probably most of you do as well. But I was not thinking about Marvel at all during this movie, just because he disappears into this movie, and it's nothing like Marvel movies. Hawkeye saves people because he's a superhero. William James, Jeremy Renner's character, saves people because he just really doesn't know what else to do. He's kind of trapped in the cycle. Once he started, he kind of became rather out of place in society and is now kind of stuck perpetually fighting, and Jeremy Renner does a really good job displaying all of that. The nominees for Best Original Screenplay are Up, A Serious Man, The Messenger, Inglourious Basterds, and The Hurt Locker. All right, the only snub I'm going to throw in here is Marion Max. I think Marion Max has a delightful screenplay, but without further ado, let's talk first about Up. I'm so happy to see Up here. The first act does a really good job just actually holding back on the exposition and just kind of lets the audience watch the story unfold without really over explaining anything. Movies with a younger target audience can sometimes tend to they feel the need to over explain things in case little kids don't understand what's going on. In certain cases, it is necessary, as is true for movies with adults at the forefront of their target audience as well. However, if it's done out of place, it can ultimately feel like the filmmakers are questioning the intelligence or insulting the intelligence of the audience, which is never something that you want to do as a filmmaker. That's one of the reasons Up is such a spectacular, it's so good at storytelling. Furthermore, they just create fun characters that share really interesting dynamics with each other. I mean, Carl, Russell, and Doug were already an amazing trio, and then Kevin was just the cherry on top. Each character is so uniquely and consistently written that you end up really believing the relationships and also the arc and change that characters go through as they know each other more. I mean, this is something that happens with Carl especially, and it just culminates in a truly heartwarming, message about friendship and adventure. All right, now let's talk about The Messenger. So I think this movie starts doing a lot of interesting things. There aren't many movies about the people who have to inform the loved ones of military personnel of their death. So the concept intrigued me right off the bat, and it was interesting to see the way different characters, different families handle the news. Some of them are inconsolable, some are rather more reserved, some are get aggressive and kind of lash out, which I think it does a really good job kind of displaying the wide range of emotion that can come from such news and how every person will probably react to it slightly differently. So the people that have the unfortunate job of informing families of this tragic news don't really know what to expect going in. I also think that the notion of one of these soldiers falling in love with one of the widows he informs is an intriguing idea. However, it didn't take it anywhere too interesting at the end. At the end of the day, making it a little bit disappointing. I think there's some interesting themes being addressed, but it never really wowed me in its approach or its direction. All right, let's talk about the Inglorious Bastard screenplay, which is just a total winner. Well, it didn't win, but it honestly probably should have. I also would have been down with an up win as well, but this movie's simply too great. From the undercover shooting the breeze scenes to the interrogative tense scenes, this is an extraordinarily well written movie. We've already talked about Christoph Waltz's portrayal of Hans Landa, but the only reason that it's as good as it is because he has such a great screenplay to work with that showcases his evil while maintaining his charm. I wouldn't even know how to begin writing a character like that. But yeah, it's just an amazing pair. If you want to see a great performance delivering a perfect screenplay, just watch the opening scene of the movie, and I guarantee you'll want to watch the rest of the movie. All right, the winner of this award was The Hurt Locker. And like I've already said, although I do prefer the screenplays of both Inglorious Bastards and Up, I can't pretend I don't like The Hurt Locker screenplay because it simply wouldn't be true. It deals with something that was, especially for the time, very relevant, being released during the Iraq War. Yeah, and it just addresses the personal effect that the war can have on an individual as well as their relationships with their families and fellow soldiers as well. The nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay are Up in the Air, In the Loop, An Education, District 9, and Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. The only snub I'm going to throw in here is The Secret in Their Eyes, which I think is a really great script. But let's talk about the first movie I've seen here, that being District 9. This is a rare opportunity to talk about the fact that this movie is written like a documentary with, fake interviews of people giving their own opinions on the worldly affairs, in this case, the presence of aliens. And although we don't get to see, the movie doesn't pick up when the aliens arrive, although we do get some insight into what that was like when the aliens first arrived. It really sets us in place several decades after they've been here, giving us a world that for quite some time has coexisted with aliens living at least in these camps that the government has set up for them. There's many different allegories that can be drawn about discrimination, immigration, segregation, making for a pretty cool piece of social commentary, with the aliens being the primary vehicle for delivering such an allegory. Okay, the winner of this award is Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. And although I have only seen one other movie here, I am pretty comfortable saying this is the movie that deserves the win. The characters, the drama, the development, the joy, and the heartbreak all come together in a way that makes for a truly moving film. I'm very, very happy that this won. It definitely deserves it. Okay, the directing nominees are Up in the Air, Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, Inglorious Bastards, Avatar, and The Hurt Locker. The only snub I want to throw in here is Polytechnique, which would never have happened, but I think it's a very well crafted movie, even though I think it gets some flack for being kind of insensitive. As a directing piece, I think it's very, very successful. But let's talk first about Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Oh boy, does Lee Daniels know how to guide his actors. He knows exactly what he wants from them, and they do too. We've already talked about the writing and editing and how successful those are, but I think the place where the directing shines through the most in this movie is through the amazing performances he pulls out that we also have already talked about. All right, let's talk about Inglourious Bastards. Tarantino's directing style is one of the most effective and recognizable in the business. I'm very fond, in particularly, of his historical revenge flicks, making Inglourious Bastards one of my absolute favorites of his. Um, it's not a small task when you look at this guy's filmography. In a past video, we talked about Pulp Fiction, and it didn't take long for us to find another stone cold classic. Although Catherine Bigelow's win, which we'll get to in a minute, was very historical, you wouldn't see me complaining about a Tarantino win here either. All right, moving on to Avatar. The only James Cameron movies that we've really talked about on this channel so far are True Lies and Avatar, which is unfortunate because although I do like both of these movies, I don't think either of them really represent the best films that this director has to offer. That being said, I do like this movie, and I think it's really impressive that James Cameron had the vision, ability, and motivation to bring it all to life, especially in such a vivid way. Still, I don't think the characters that he crafts are very memorable. The villain is just a macho American stereotype. Jake himself is not that memorable of a character, just leaving a bit more depth to be desired. All right, the winner of this award was Catherine Bigelow for The Hurt Locker. She was the first woman to ever win the Best Director Oscar. It is actually crazy that it took up to 2009 for that to happen. And since then, I think only one other woman has won an Oscar for directing. It's pretty crazy. Now, whenever you watch The Hurt Locker, when you watch this movie, it's very clear to see why she's winning this award. She does do a great job depicting war as a drug, but not like how most movies do. While most movies will over rely on the blur, uneasy, shaky cam and quick cuts, which this movie does have, it never feels nauseating or disorienting to watch. In fact, this movie replicates the drug-like effect of war through a heightened sense of awareness, not a blurred one, a heightened sense of reality that only adds to the panic. Overall, Catherine Bigelow is just directing the crap out of this movie. The nominees for Best Foreign Language Film are The White Ribbon, A Prophet, The Milk of Sorrow, Ajami, and The Secret in Their Eyes. Now, only snub I'm going to throw in here is Polytechnique, which is a very good movie and should have been here. But without further ado, let's talk about The Secret in Their Eyes. I'm not going to try and give too much away about this movie, but it's really good. I do think some parts, I'll just say right off the bat, go on for longer than they need to. I think it could be a bit tighter than it is, but overall, the screenplay is very intriguing. I found this movie just engaging, entertaining, ultimately rather satisfying as well. I think more people should check this movie out. All right, the nominees for Best Animated Feature Film are The Secret of Kells, The Princess and the Frog, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Coraline, and Up. Okay, this is a crazy set of very diverse and very good movies. This was a great year for animation. Snub, Mary and Max. Mary and Max is a really, really good movie, and it should have been in here. But without further ado, let's talk about The Princess and the Frog. It has been a long time since I've seen this movie, but it falls in line with some other classic storytellers like Shrek and Beauty and the Beast. And I'm not saying that this movie is as good as either of those movies, but just noting the similarity in themes. I remember watching this movie in theaters as a kid when it first came out, and the voodoo scared me because I was only like 5 years old. But placing that aside, it is a good movie that ultimately stood no chance of winning compared to the other great films. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about Fantastic Mr. Fox. So this is my personal favorite of all Wes Anderson's films, that I've seen at least. There's just an utterly irreplaceable charm to it. The unique visual style of Wes pairs beautifully with the stop motion animation, resulting in visuals that truly just pop off the screen while making a very distinct aesthetic for the movie at the same time. We've already talked about the score and how wonderful that is, but the movie just shines through in the relationship dynamics as well, both of Mr. Fox and the neighboring animals, but especially with the central family. Ash and Kristofferson have a particularly memorable relationship that carries the angst, rivalry, and friendship that makes part of this movie almost feel like a coming-of-age story. Long story short, this movie is so fun and lovable that it goes beyond being one of the best animated movies of the year and ends up just being one of the best movies of the year, period. All right, Coraline. Believe it or not, this is actually the first time that I've seen Coraline, which is pretty wild considering that it's a film of my generation and is pretty much a classic at this point. It's pretty rare to see horror in this category as well. In fact, I'm not sure if another horror film has ever been nominated. Just having animation and horror be such a rare combination. And yes, I do consider this movie a horror movie. What other genre would you classify it as? Um, but I gotta say, the movie hooked me right off the bat with the very eerie opening credits showing the doll of Coraline being put together, which created a real sense of intrigue and uncertainty and curiosity all at the same time. A really great start to the movie. And then, yeah, just the discovery got better from there. It does a really good job capturing the childlike wonder of exploration, even if some of those things do end up evolving into something that is straight up nightmare fuel. I feel like this movie would have probably destroyed me as a kid, especially if the Princess and the Frog scared me. I would never have seen this one coming. But as an adult watching it, yeah, it's a really, really well done movie. On top of being a super wild ride, the movie just has a very satisfying conclusion to it as well. I'm really glad that I watched it. All right, Up. So, Up is easily one of my favorite movies of this year and my favorite animated movie from this year. Yeah, it's something that you really enjoy a lot as a kid, but end up appreciating more as you get older and are able to understand and respect the much more mature themes of the story. The only unfortunate thing about this year's animated feature race is that Up was also nominated for Best Picture. Now, I'm not saying it's unfortunate that it was nominated for Best Picture, but it makes the animated feature race not as exciting because it's extremely predictable. There's only one nominee that was also a Best Picture nominee. It's really the only reasonable choice for winning that award. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that that happened to this category. But it is good that it was nominated for Best Picture ultimately. Speaking of, let's talk about the Best Picture nominees. The nominees for Best Picture are Up in the Air, Up, A Serious Man, Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, Inglorious Bastards, An Education, District 9, The Blind Side, Avatar, and The Hurt Locker. Okay, the snubs I'm going to throw out here are Polytechnique, Marion Max, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. I know we got an animated movie in here, but Loki still wasn't enough for me. Okay, starting off with Up. Just gonna say right off the bat, this is the movie that should have won. I think it's the best nominee here. It would have been amazing. It would have been a historical win. It would have been, but it is ultimately very cool that it's getting nominated in the first place. Being the second of only 3 animated films to ever get nominated for Best Picture is pretty special. And part of the reason I think it got nominated is because this is the first year that the number of nominees jumped from 5 to 10. This happened probably because the year prior there was a lot of backlash when The Dark Knight didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Now, if I were the Academy, I would have just started nominating the best movies of the year, but you know what? Yeah, doubling the number of nominees works too, I guess. If this had happened sooner in the decade, it's very possible that films like Shrek, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Wall-E, all of which received screenplay nominations, may also have managed to get a Best Picture nominee, but we'll never know for sure. Alright, now let's talk about Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this movie because we've already talked about it quite a bit recently, but that just shows how much it's doing right. The directing, the acting, the writing, they're all super impressive, making it ultimately and very easily one of my favorite movies of the year. But as awesome as Precious is, Inglorious Bastards is even better. It pretty much has everything you could want from a Quentin Tarantino movie. Over the top violence, snappy dialogue, and a good mix of comedy and action. This movie totally rules. I love it. It would have been a really cool win, actually. All right, let's talk about District 9. So, this movie wasn't a required viewing for me because although nominated for Best Picture, it didn't actually win any awards. However, I decided to rent the movie, which I don't usually do. I can't just rent every single movie um, to watch because that would just add up really, really quickly for this channel. And yeah, that's asking way too much. So, but ultimately, I watched the trailer and just was like, no, I have to watch this movie before doing the episode, the channel episode, just because I mean, the trailer intrigued me so much. I think it's a really successful trailer. So yeah, and I don't regret renting it. I'm really glad I saw it. It was a very very good movie. It's really cool, but it's also not the type of movie that usually gets nominated for Best Picture. Not just because it's like a science fiction action movie, um, but also I think it's the only mockumentary that I've ever seen get nominated. And again, it's only partially a mockumentary. It becomes a more straightforward movie, later on in the film. Um, but yeah, there are even parts of this movie that felt kind of like a body horror flick. It was like kind of scary at times, but at the end of the day, yeah, it was quite good, and it's really interesting to see it here. All right, The Blind Side. We really haven't talked about this movie much. It only got nominated for one other Oscar. Granted, it did win such an Oscar. It is also, it just makes it a little bit unfortunate that it really had no real shot of winning the Best Picture award. Simply only getting nominated for one other award, it just never would have happened. However, with all that in mind, I'm really happy to see this movie here. It is one of my favorite movies of the year. Has a really sweet message about family and kindness while also just being a really entertaining sports movie along the way. All right, let's talk about Avatar. Avatar has an interesting place in pop culture. Um, in that it's a movie that was huge when it came out. It was a very big deal. Everyone saw it. Everyone has now seen it. Everyone knows it, and no one really talks about it. Um, until another movie comes out. Once another Avatar movie comes out, people talk about it again briefly, and then the period passes and it kind of fades back into the shadows. It fails to have the long lasting impact that other science fiction series like Star Wars or Dune have. There aren't really any popular video games, Lego sets, or toys from these movies, and I know that you can't judge a film based off of its merchandise, but I think it's an interesting illustration of how this movie that was a really big deal has ultimately ended up impacting the culture in a very minimal way. Personally, I think the movie is technologically very impressive and also quite entertaining to watch, but I don't have much of a deeper analysis beyond that. Okay, the Best Picture award went to The Hurt Locker. And while I won't say this is the best war movie of the year, it is the best war movie of the year. And what I mean by that is that while there are other films that are better, specifically Inglourious Bastards, um, none of them do as good of a job depicting the realistic, gritty reality of war. This movie has a very also powerful ending. We've already talked about how spectacular the directing is. I actually quite enjoyed this film on a rewatch more than my initial viewing, and I'm looking forward to eventually watching it a third time. Hopefully, it just gets better and better. But yeah, this movie is spectacular. But yeah, what a great year for movies. Really looking forward to it. The next video is going to be 1 year over. So we're going straight from 2009 into 2010. We're going to do the 83rd Academy Awards. So yeah, watch films from 2010, and I'll see you soon.